ESPN Classic welcomes you to the following presentation of the National Football League.
A4, you know where it is?
No.
I'll show you right where it is.
Okay, great.
This stadium, this field really represents the soul of the city of Baltimore.
It just came down so beautifully, it almost looked like something they would do on a Star Wars movie.
Every day that we're here, people stop and take pictures. Some people get teary-eyed.
Mommy's seats were right about up there. I think that was section 135, and all the player wives used to sit up there.
It is very emotional, especially when you look at this hollowed out shell of a building and you remember the rich memories that were created here.
Since the end of the 2000 season, two NFL landmarks have become lost treasures. Memorial Stadium in Baltimore and Three Rivers Stadium in Pittsburgh were both demolished. And when those two ballparks went down, 66 years of football history went down with them. It made me think of that Frank Sinatra song, "There Used to Be a Ballpark." I know the song's about baseball, but really it's about the emotional connection of a town and its team, whatever the sport. At the heart of that connection is the ballpark. And I can't think of many places where the heart beats stronger or louder than Three Rivers Stadium and Memorial Stadium. They called Memorial Stadium the world's largest outdoor insane asylum. It was an old-fashioned ballpark where the fans were close to the action, and that feeling of closeness carried over to the players.
Baltimore Memorial Stadium. Yeah, that was a homey kind of place. People seemed to enjoy going to the games, and they had their old friends and they talked. And it was like a college atmosphere.
Hey, program here, championship.
At Memorial Stadium, even the vendors dressed in team colors. I'd never seen that before. And the ushers were the most courteous in the league.
A4, you know where it is?
No.
I'll show you right where it is.
Okay, great.
Be careful of the court.
I remember the fog that used to roll in there. It was so thick that some days you could hardly see the row houses behind the fence. It was hard on our cameramen because sometimes the visibility was almost zero. I still don't know how Johnny Unitas ever saw Raymond Berry on this play or how Berry ever caught the ball. They should have made the Hall of Fame on this one touchdown alone. I always thought the fog was just moisture blowing in from the Chesapeake. But after seeing this footage, I have a new theory. Cigarettes. Check these crowd shots. Everywhere you look, someone's smoking. We even caught one of the Colts cheerleaders smoking. You know, she'd get fired for that today. And look, here's our camera crew lighting up. And you know what? These guys don't even smoke. It was just something about that stadium, I guess. No wonder the view from the upper deck looked like this. Now, Three Rivers Stadium, that was a whole different environment. It was a newer facility, opened in 1970. The stadium was perfectly round, and the music was perfectly square. The Steelers had this house band, and the music just ruined our sound. We'd go into a sideline huddle to get some of Jack Lambert's intensity, and all we would get would be the band doing a bad imitation of Stevie Wonder. Those are the things that gave each stadium its character, like the tiny locker rooms in Baltimore. It's hard for me to believe they're gone now. But if the memory of these two stadiums is all that remains, it remains something very special.
We have revived the terrible cow which carried them all the way in '75. The terrible cow imputes great strength to the Steelers and, if need be, poses mysterious difficulties for the enemy.
Take them inside.
Memorial Stadium was located in a row house neighborhood of Baltimore, so a lot of people just walked to the games. You couldn't get lost. All you had to do was follow the scent of crab cakes, and you'd find the grand old lady of 33rd Street. The first Colts game was played here in 1947, and some of the NFL's greatest dramas unfolded on this field. In 1998, I toured the old ballpark with two men who helped write its history, Tom Matte and Lenny Moore. Tom, you were explaining that the field curved up here or something?
Well, Jimmy would go down the hill, and then all of a sudden he'd make that catch in the corner of the end zone.
Right over here is Orr's Corner.
Orrsville,
right,
and he'd just slide up there and then slide back down. I don't think it'll ever happen again, Steve. I don't think it'll ever happen. The kind of camaraderie that the fans and the players had, it was a very special time here.
Yeah. The stadium had been empty for a year, and it was sad to see it falling apart. It was especially emotional for Lenny, who feels the stadium's importance extends far beyond the playing field.
In the community of Baltimore, a lot of things changed, and I think a lot of that was due to what took place right here in the stadium. It was like a meeting place, because here in Baltimore, things weren't the best when I came here. You know, it was sort of a divide. Blacks over here, whites over here, and this kind of thing. And in this stadium, I think, was a catalyst for bringing people together.
This stadium, this field really represents the soul of the city of Baltimore. This was the one place of common ground. And I think unlike stadiums today, here everybody had to wait in the same line for the same urinal. You bought from the same hot dog vendor. Stadiums today, they're very class-centric. You've got skyboxes, club seats, and then you go down to the end zone. So it really was common ground, and I think what the history of this stadium, both with the Colts and the Orioles, it created a venue for civic pride. The Colts and the Orioles provided the common ground for both CEOs and cabbies to have something to talk about, black and white, rich and poor. And this was the context where all people came together.
Joe Ehrmann experienced firsthand the coming together of the Baltimore fans. Now that's Joe in the middle of a wild celebration after the Colts clinched the AFC Eastern title in 1975. When I think about the Baltimore Colts fans, that's what I remember. I remember a wonderful cross-section of blue-collar workers and corporate executives, young people, old people, all joined as one, cheering for the Colts and having a ball.
I remember they had this cheerleader, this one guy who would spell out C-O-L-T, you know, and he'd make himself into an S, and he used to get up on the ledge and do that Colts cheer 50 times a game.
The big wheel and the spoke were just two regular guys who one day in 1975 jumped up and led a cheer that made them famous.
You hear all the team talking about the crowd enthusiasm. The crowd does a good job, but there's some people that sit there and they're afraid to cheer because of the way they are. And we feel that, you know, we get these people going. You know, and when we get them going, you've heard of that here today, right? And we get them all going.
Memorial Stadium only cost $5 million to build, so it was a no-frills kind of a place. It sat 57,000 fans, none of them comfortably. The old wooden bleachers helped one enterprising lady make a lot of money during football season.
Stadium seats. Watch the game in comfort. Stadium seats. Get your stadium seats right here. Keep the splinters out. Keep the splinters out. Stadium seats right here.
The seats were hard, the seats were rough. It really wasn't a comfort stadium, but she was something special to us. You look at the construction of her, she was built in sections, slapped together, but she always had the mystique of our grand old lady of 33rd Street.
Baltimore was one of the first places where people talked about home field advantage. In the years from 1957 through 71, the Colts had the NFL's highest home winning percentage, and the crowd support was a big part of that. The most visible and vocal fan was Loudy Loudenslager. Along with his wife, Flo, Loudy would greet the Colts at the airport when they returned from every away game, win or lose. You could always find Loudy on the field, but he wasn't alone. There were more people on the field at Memorial Stadium than anywhere else in the league. Here you could say the fans really were in the game. Now look at this scene from the 1975 season. There are more fans than players on the Colts bench. But what you saw expressed in Baltimore was a genuine love between the fans and the team. It's a bond that, despite the loss of the Colts and now the loss of the stadium, will be felt in this community forever.
One of the greatest sports movies of all time, Gene Hackman.
In my book, we're going to be winners.
And Dennis Hopper in a real classic, Hoosiers, the movie and the inside story. 9 Eastern Sunday on ESPN Classic.
1983.
Pittsburgh, oh, it's a long way.
Classic.
Are you Jim?
Yes.
Jim, did you recently subscribe to ESPN the magazine?
Who are you?
Well, I'm the ESPN the magazine delivery guy, here with your free ESPN the magazine fleece pullover.
Great, thanks.
Whoa! Jim, don't you want to see how good it looks? I know I sure do.
Yeah.
Here, I'll help you.
Great.
Grab it through the hole here. Pull it down the back. Start to feel that warmth already. How comfortable is that?
Yeah,
I can tell
very...
you're loving it. Oh, that looks good.
Subscribe to ESPN the magazine and get 1 year, 26 issues for just $1 an issue. $1 an issue. That's 75% off the newsstand price. And our extra large fleece pullover is free.
Call now, 1-800-641-3113.
Oh, bye, Jim. Enjoy that fleece and the magazine. Do I love my job or what?
When Three Rivers Stadium opened in 1970, the New York Times described it as magnificent. It certainly was a big improvement for the Steelers, who had practiced in a city park for years. Moving to Three Rivers at least made them feel like a major league team. The stadium cost $36 million to build, and it was one of those dual-purpose stadiums that, like leisure suits and sideburns, seemed fashionable at the time. I didn't like these new stadiums at all. They just seemed cold and impersonal. But the Pittsburgh fans brought this place to life. The city was so starved for a winner that when the Steelers finally got on track in the 1970s, the fans went wild. In their first 10 seasons here, the Steelers had a winning percentage of .841, and the fans developed a reputation that was almost as intimidating as the Steel Curtain defense. When you have fans who can brave a January ice storm wearing only a terrible towel, well, that's enough to psych out any opponent. In Baltimore, we talked about how the fans pulled together as one community. Well, in Pittsburgh, it was a little different. There were dozens of fan clubs for individual players, and in a way, it mirrored the ethnic diversity of Pittsburgh. This was the Jack Ham fan club. Dobra Shunka means great ham in Polish. This was my favorite, the Dwight White fan club. They were simply known as Dwight's Whites. But the biggest fan club was Franco Harris's Italian Army. Franco was the son of an African-American father and an Italian mother, and his success in Pittsburgh brought together a real mixed bag of supporters.
We started with the Kansas City game. The thing spread all over the country, had a UPI story on it, and now we're moving. Now we got troops all over the place.
How many people in the whole army altogether?
About 40,000 so far now. We got 40 flags with 40,000 troops. We're tough. We're tough.
Everywhere you looked in Pittsburgh, there was someone waving an Italian flag. Look at this guy. For him, every game was an Army-Navy game. Even Frank Sinatra enlisted in Franco's army. And just so they wouldn't feel left out, there was a Jewish branch of the army as well. it seemed like every Steeler had his own fan club. It was probably the only team in history where even the offensive linemen had fan clubs. But one player who didn't have a fan club was Ben McGee, number 60. He's the forgotten member of the original Steel Curtain.
They didn't know me. They would ask me, who is Ben McGee?
Do you feel a little left out that when people think about the Steel Curtain, they don't think of you?
No, really I don't, because I just feel like I was so happy to be playing when I did play. And I really can't help by what people say or what they do. I just know I had a good season, and I was really happy to have the season I did.
McGee was one of the few veterans retained by Chuck Noll when he took over as coach in 1969. When the Steelers finally made it to the playoffs in '72, Ben was in his 9th season and playing on a bad knee. On the day of the Steelers' first playoff game against Oakland, Ben had already decided to retire.
I walked in the stadium that morning. I had thought about it all that night, and I walked in the stadium, and I sit on my locker, and I said, "I'll go up and tell Coach Chuck Noll that this is my last game."
So, when the Raiders go ahead, and there's 30 seconds to go, you're looking at the clock figuring it's over, right?
Yeah, what I did, believe it or not, when the Raiders went ahead, I believe I had to pull my pads off because I knew the game was over then. And then when Franco Harris caught that pass just before it hit the carpet and went in, I said to myself, I got one more to go.
The immaculate reception extended Ben McGee's career by one game. The following week, the Steelers lost to Miami, and Ben took off his pads for good. He retired to a career in college coaching, and he watched as just 2 years later, his old team won the first of its 4 Super Bowls.
Was there any part of you that said, I made a mistake, I should have...
No, I didn't think of it that way. I was so glad to see them win it, but I'd never said that I wished I was there, you know, because at that time my knee was hurting me so bad, and I figured it was time for me to get out.
The life of a legend.
He was like God.
The price of victory.
We're going to work now.
Sports Century Paul Bear Bryant, Friday, December 13th, 8 p.m. on ESPN Classic. The Junction Boys, Saturday, 9 p.m. on ESPN.
Yeah, I remember that Colts marching band.
Dad might be a little off-key, but he has the right idea. The Colts band was a big part of that Baltimore spirit.
At the stadium, when you come out of the tunnel, they had the bands, cheerleaders lined out, and you ran out, and they played that Colts song, and it really pumped me up. I ran out of there 13, 14 years, I don't know how many times, but the enthusiasm, if I felt bad, as soon as I got out there and I heard the crowd and I heard the band, it picked me up. It put me where I should be.
The band was founded for the original Colts, the All-American Conference Colts of 1947. The band actually stayed together and continued to perform in the 11 years when there was no football in Baltimore. The band played at games in other NFL cities and kept the spirit of Baltimore football alive until the Ravens filled the void in 1996. The band is now known as the Marching Ravens, but in its heart, it will always be the Colts band.
The band became, I feel, the musical heart of this team. They were your dentists. They were your doctors. We've had a priest at one time, helicopter pilots, housewives, insurance salesmen, hot dog vendors. You name it, we've had it. We even have a gentleman who was played for the Russian Air Force marching band. So it's like a family. You join together, you become part of the family.
An NFL Films cameraman named Dave Ryan was part of the Colts band too. It really was like a family, especially for John Zeman. In 1969, John met a Colts cheerleader named Charlene Wills and married her.
My wife became the flag line instructor eventually. At the same time, she was, with birth, with my son, Christopher, with child. And we had an exhibition game on a Friday night, and her water started to break right at the stadium. So we had to get her out of there real fast, and he was born the next day. So my son almost was born right on 33rd Street.
John Zeman's house is a shrine to Baltimore sports history. You walk through his basement and it's like being back in Memorial Stadium. John saw the Colts era come and go in Baltimore, so he felt mixed emotions when he led the band onto the field for the final game at Memorial Stadium. He enjoyed seeing the old Colt legends back on the field, but still, there was a definite sadness in the air.
On that last game, I got a lot of teasing from the younger people in the band. Hey, John, you having flashbacks? You know, like I said, you think you're back in 1958? And I said, yes, I am. I said, yes, I am. I said, because I'm getting a second chance to see my heroes on this field one more time.
We shot this in black and white so it would have a kind of 1950s feel. The old Colts ran one last play, and fittingly, Lenny Moore took it into the end zone. And the big wheel was there, bigger than ever, to lead one more cheer. When the ceremony ended, it seemed like no one wanted to leave. The former players stayed and posed for pictures. It was as if no one wanted to let go. The last people in the stadium were the band members, and when they left the field, John Zeman lagged behind.
There was one time I made sure I was the last band member out of that stadium. I was going to be the last. And I walked out, with some of the members of the equipment crew, and I just said, okay, guys, go a few steps ahead of me. And they went through the gate, and I just turned around and said goodbye to her.
That'd have been beautiful, that would have been special, man.
In 1973, Sports Illustrated assigned a writer to spend an entire season with an NFL team. The writer was Roy Blunt Jr., and the team he chose was the Pittsburgh Steelers.
One of many reasons I decided to spend a year with the Steelers of all NFL teams was that they had a cornerback named, you got that? It's my name. And as it turned out, Mel and I became very good friends, and at one point he would introduce me as his little brother. This is his jersey, and it's now a Hall of Fame jersey, and it's probably got some Raider blood on it somewhere. I hope so. The Steelers to me were sort of like the Mississippi River for Mark Twain. It really, it meant a lot to me, and I kind of got to know America in the Steeler locker room, I think.
Roy documented his experience in a best-selling book entitled About 3 Bricks Shy of a Load. It was clear in his writing that he felt at home in the Steelers' locker room, but that wasn't true at first.
Yeah, I think when you first are around any kind of professional sports team, you're scared and intimidated, and there's just these big, huge guys, and especially when you're in the locker room, you don't really belong in there. I mean, you have a right to be there, but it's their locker room, and they've got all this bond, and they're all wearing the same clothes, and they're all twice as big as you are, and but you get to know them, and they are vulnerable and extremely vulnerable. When I was there, they were making not much. They might be making less money than I was. I mean, those guys making $20,000 a year playing, who were great players. I don't think there'll ever be that kind of scruffy, down-home sort of feeling amongst people who are enormously talented anymore. And the stadium was just sort of set that off, maybe. It was like having a whole lot of great, if you let a whole lot of great, lovable mixed-breed dogs from the pound out, if you put them into some sterile facility, you might appreciate the dogs even more. And it was a pretty sterile facility. It was, sort of metallic and round, perfectly round, and that didn't have much character. It didn't need much character in Pittsburgh.
Hey, Cleveland, how you like us now?
The heart of that team, the core of that team, the best player on the team was Joe Green. The steel curtain spread out from him.
They taking no prisoners, go kill it all. Ain't no room for them.
They were mean. I was sort of shivered sometimes. I saw some, I liked Mel Blount a lot, but I saw some footage of him beating up on poor Golden Richards in this merciless way. They were mean, those Steeler guys. And Pittsburgh liked that as long as they were being mean to Cowboys. I mean, you beat up on a guy named Golden, and who's going to hate you?
Blunt was fascinated by Franco Harris, who said very little, yet did so much.
Franco was a beautiful man, for one thing. He was just really mysterious looking, and he looked like he ought to be presiding over some sort of the Venetian Senate or something, you know, and he ought to be Othello or somebody. I don't know. He had this striking mixture of Italian and African American blood. And he had this one amazing sort of distance in his face, and he was very soft-spoken and didn't say much. Anybody ever saw him, I think, was struck by how interesting looking a person he was. He had a mystique about him, which was probably heightened by the fact that he didn't talk a lot. But he was not at all pretentious. I remember somebody on the team saying they were Franco's rookie year. They were driving home from the game, and they looked to the side of the road, and they saw this guy trudging along. And they stopped, and it was Franco walking home from the game. His car was in the shop or something. And so they picked him up and gave him a ride.
I'm so glad I'm a Pittsburgh Steeler. Oh, make me a song, man.
Roy Blunt's book revealed the human side of a football team that won and had fun doing it.
Oh, Terry Bradshaw. Bird, if you're watching, talk to my agent about my next movie. Make it a Western. You gonna let me be in it? Yeah. I'm gonna be in the movie with Brad.
Still remember being in that facility, hearing all that wonderful talk. I still follow the Steelers and worry about them. My son and I watch the Steelers every time they're on television, and I'm still a Steeler where it counts.
In the 1970s, the Colts defensive line was known as the Looney Tunes, and Joe Ehrman, number 76, was the looniest tune of all.
Let me ask you, you have the reputation, when we ask it around, you're one of the team clowns. You're one of the guys that keeps everybody loose and up, and yet you seem quite serious now. Is it getting down to that part of the season when you just have to be serious about it?
Yeah, I think so. This is a serious game.
Oh, yeah. You can see Joe was real serious before every game. Joe was just a fun-loving guy whose talent and personality helped the Colts go from worst to first in the AFC East.
Beautiful. Keep it going there.
Got it, man.
I'm too tired to talk. First time in my life.
But by the time Joe's football career ended in 1981, he was a different person. He found religion and became a minister in Baltimore. A few months ago, he brought his sons, Barney and Joe, back to Memorial Stadium for one final visit.
I can't remember my last game here.
It was like 100 years ago.
That wasn't quite 100 years ago. This field was built on tremendous tradition because you had third and fourth generation fans. You had, they actually passed down the season tickets, and you had an awful lot of men that had been taken there by their dads and are now taking their sons.
The Colts always left the field through the baseball dugout, and it looked like they were stepping down into a mine shaft. We wondered if 20 years later, Joe could still find his way through that dark, winding tunnel.
All right, well, this is where we came out of, and let's go in here, and we'll go down here. No. There's a ton of water in there. And there used to always be water. Yeah, jeez. Well, we'll try another way. Wow, look at this.
We found a passageway on the other side of the field, but it was still pretty treacherous. Our crew had only a small handheld light to find its way through the debris.
Watch the nail, watch it. See the nail, Joe?
No one had ventured down here in years. It was a little spooky. We thought we had stumbled into our own Blair Witch project. But we were determined to find the Colts locker room.
That would be the clubhouse room there. There's an old dryer where they used to do the towels. Yeah, here's the locker room right here. And we just had a long, open face kind of separate lockers with hooks on them. But it really looks different now. It was a nasty place, though. It was always filled with cockroaches and very dirty all the time.
From there, we went upstairs to see the place where Joe first met his wife, Paula. Believe it or not, Joe and Paula met through a blind date promotion arranged by a Baltimore disc jockey named Commander Jim.
But right here was where I met your mother. That was right around that door is a locker room, and Mommy was right here. And I can remember I was standing here signing autographs, and I had no idea what she looked like. We had talked over the phone, and I remember kind of looking up, and I could tell by the way she was looking at me that she was the one, and so we introduced right here. I had left her 2 tickets, and then we went in there for a big team party. It was the last game of the season. We beat the Patriots to win the division, go into the playoffs, and we had a great party in there. And Mom and I have been together ever since. Mommy's seats were right about up there. I think that was section 135, and all the player wives used to sit up there in the upper deck. Today they give them 50-yard line seats down front, but back then it was all the way up there. It was where Mom used to sit for all the games.
To this day, whenever I think about the upper deck of Memorial Stadium, I think about Donald Kroner. Now, he's the pilot who tried to land his private plane on the field after a 1976 playoff game and instead wound up crashing into the upper deck. And the most amazing thing was, no one got hurt, not even Donald Kroner.
The plane was buzzing the whole week before practice. There was a pilot that while we were practicing was dropping toilet paper rolls on our practice. Yeah. And after the game, he landed a plane right in the upper deck there. And we were in the locker room, and they said, what was that noise? And somebody said, a plane just hit the stadium.
I was filming in the Colts locker room when I heard about the crash. Listen, you can hear 2 reporters talking about it in the background.
No, the grandstand.
Well, we heard that, and we ran upstairs to see for ourselves.
I'll tell you.
We were able to find an eyewitness who was still shaken by what he had seen.
What happened here today, sir? What happened? Well, it's very difficult to say at this time. We'd rather not make any pertinent comment other than the fact that a damn airplane crashed in the stands and almost wiped out the stadium. They forcibly had to drag the pilot out of the aircraft as fuel was spewing from the tanks all over the seats. Other than that, we really have nothing to say.
A quarter of a century later, Joe Ehrman and his sons were back in that same upper deck, taking one last look before it all came down.
I'm really thankful I had the opportunity to do this. I'm glad you guys got to come today. Because soon it's going to be all gone. It'll be all gone. You'll be able to tell your kids there used to be a stadium here someday.
Yeah.
Ball is at the 13-yard line, third, less than a yard.
Salt Lake City's favorite teams, Utah's biggest legends, in a full day of their greatest showdowns. And it's only on ESPN Classic. Malone and Stockton lead the Jazz in the buzzer beater against the Rockets from '97 that sent them to their first NBA Finals. Catch classic Utah Utes football and basketball action. Plus, a profile of BYU legend Steve Young and much more. Classic Salt Lake City starts at noon Eastern, 10 a.m. Mountain, Sunday, only on ESPN Classic. Brought to you locally by...
Just get it done just before baseball season.
Steelers owner Art Rooney was one of the NFL's founding fathers, so he was a little mystified by the new surroundings at Three Rivers Stadium. Here he is explaining the miracle of artificial turf to Don Shula.
And the same with baseball. They took 4 tons of dirt out of here for every conversion.
Then there was the dirt that never left the stadium. Meet Dirt DiNardo. He was the groundskeeper in Pittsburgh and an earthy guy in every sense of the word.
Dirt DiNardo was a great Pittsburgh character. Dirt was this big, bald guy with always seemed unshaven, and he just had no politeness for anybody. Everybody loved Dirt.
Dirt's real name is Steve, but no one ever called him that. He was just plain Dirt, and he enjoyed kidding around with our crew.
What's it free? Hey, God, Rooney, and me. saw Italian flag, I had a ball.
Dirt made one last visit to Three Rivers Stadium the day before the implosion.
To see the stadium the way it is now, know it's coming down tomorrow.
Just like someone got killed in their prime. They have a lot of records in this stadium. 5 Super Bowls, 4 they won, 2 World Series, won both of them, 20 playoff games, 250 rock shows, tractor pools, the Jehovah's Witness. You go on and on with this stadium.
Dirt is now retired, but he's one of those guys you never forget. He'd walk right up to an opposing coach and he'd tell him, "Hey, you're doing a lousy job." And one of his favorite targets was John Madden.
They tell us that we had to get off the field while they loosened up when they come into town. He said to me, "You'll have to get off the field to close practice." So I said to him, "This is a playoff game." I said, "John, if you ain't got it all together by now, you'll never get it together. So you might as well go in the us if we want to close practice."
Madden accused Dirt of deliberately flooding the field and turning it to ice before a 1976 playoff game. Now there's irony for you, the Raiders accusing someone else of sabotaging the field.
He said, "What'd you do to me? Did you put a hose on this field?" I said, "No." I tried to explain to him, he wouldn't believe me anyway. But I said, "It's the same for both teams." He said, "No, it isn't. The Steelers run up the middle. We run around the ends." He said, "You're tying my guys up. They can't run on ice." Well, Steelers will be here at 1 o'clock to make sure your team's here.
The Raiders lost the game, and afterwards, Madden was still talking about the icy field.
Well, I've always believed and said that you can't worry about things that you can't control. There were parts of it that were icy. They were very slippery, and we just had some footing problems in some areas of the field. I felt that we, could get guys open and stuff, but the guys were having a tough time, cutting and working back to the ball the way we do.
The Raiders never liked playing at Three Rivers Stadium.
It's cold. Playing cold.
The Steelers, of course, loved it. That's the definition of home field advantage. And Dirt DiNardo was part of that, going all the way back to the Forbes Field era in Pittsburgh.
We had a lot of fun them days. It's a different breed today than it was 20 years ago.
Different how, Dirt?
The ball player. Everybody got an agent. Before, you go to have a beer with somebody right after the game. Even today when I see them. LC, Joe Green, jive and talk.
Will you watch the implosion tomorrow? Will you be here?
No, I'll be on my living room watching. It feels like a part of me was going down. But other than that, I realized it's time to change. Forest Field went down, Pitt Stadium went down, this is going down. Well, it's progress, signs of the times. You've got to go with it.
Yeah,
The Steelers played their last game in Three Rivers Stadium on December 16th. It was a cold, rainy day, but the Steelers' big win over Washington left everyone with a warm feeling.
This was special. I'm embracing the moment right now.
Within the cheers of that sellout crowd was the echo of 14 division titles and 5 conference championships. It was hard after 30 years to have only one day to say both thank you and goodbye. After the game, the players took a final bow and paid their last respects.
It's our house. It's our house.
Just 7 weeks later, Three Rivers Stadium was a stripped-down carcass of concrete and dirt. The turf field and most of the seats had been auctioned off. The 800 support beams were packed with dynamite and readied for the implosion.
It is very emotional, especially when you look at this hollowed-out shell of a building and you remember the rich memories that were created here. And I remember standing room only crowds with terrible towels being waved in the air. That's what I think. When I think of Three River Stadium, I think of that. I think of this town really coming together behind the great teams that played here.
NFL, Pittsburgh dominates NFL. Pittsburgh.
2 hours, it won't matter.
It's going down.
Going down. Oh, wait, not that late.
I'd just like to say, in a matter of 2 hours, we're coming live at you from Pittsburgh, and that sucker ain't going to be here no more.
All right. Woohoo!
What are you preparing? Get your camera away.
On the eve of the implosion, thousands of people partied all night in the streets of Mount Washington, overlooking the stadium. It was a combination tailgate party and wake.
That's like a landmark. If you're lost in Pittsburgh, you look for the stadium. It's going to be gone, and I'm going to be really lost in Pittsburgh. Find your way home now. All right. Where's the stadium?
Sunday dawned clear, but bitterly cold. The temperature was 12 degrees, but the wind chill was 8 below zero. Still, 4,000 people, many of whom had camped out all night, lined Mount Washington to witness the implosion. Another 20,000 people filled the riverbank in Point State Park. They came to see 30 years of history reduced to 160,000 tons of rubble.
When they actually blow it in just a few minutes, do you think you'll shed a tear? What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, just another wonderful thing that's now and that will soon be in the past, just in people's memories.
At 8 a.m., the demolition engineers pushed a button and set off dozens of separate charges. 5,000 pounds of dynamite were detonated. The stadium shuddered, and for an eerie moment, it just stood there. Then, slowly, the upper deck gave way and collapsed into the sections below. Within a matter of seconds, Three Rivers Stadium was gone.
It just came down so beautifully, it almost looked like something they would do on a Star Wars movie, digital, where it was fake. But the fact that it was for real and this thing just went down.
The implosion had to be perfect, because you can see the Steelers' new stadium. It's right there next to Three Rivers. The two structures are only 80 feet apart, so the slightest mistake could have been disastrous. But the engineers brought the old ballpark down with almost surgical precision. At first, the crowd cheered the implosion. But as the stadium fell and that huge cloud of dust drifted across the river, the cheers seemed to fade. Only now it seemed that the sense of loss really sank in.
Honestly, I'm extremely disappointed because it was 3 seconds and 35 years of history was gone.
I think December 16th, the Washington Redskins, when all the players came, we were down right in the front row. We got to shake everybody's hands. That's a memory that I never, ever forget, because that's the 70 Steelers, Jack Lambert, Franco Harris, Lynn Swan. That's a memory I'll cherish forever.
We're going to shake their hands.
Every one of them.
Were you brought up in this area, were you brought up in Penn Hills or Norton or around this area, you brought up like I was in the 60s and 70s, you understand how great it is. Sorry for all that. I'm a little bit emotional right now.
Baltimore's Memorial Stadium sat vacant for 3 years after the Ravens played their final game here in 1997. The old ballpark was plagued by vandals and overrun by rats. Finally, the state decided to tear it down and use the land for senior citizen housing. But former Maryland governor and Baltimore mayor William Donald Schaefer opposed the plan, and he visited the stadium with our crew in February.
Just to see this magnificent stadium being torn down for non-use makes me sad. Now, it's so easy to tear something down. It's so hard to keep things up. It's hard. And when you got an opportunity to save something and reuse it, that's even better.
Schaefer's plan was to convert the stadium into a retail development. He felt shops and restaurants could be built into the existing structure. As a Colts fan, he had a real affection for the place and tried his best to save it. But by the end of the month, the state was moving ahead with a demolition. Since the ballpark was in a residential area, they decided against using explosives. They chose to knock it down the old-fashioned way, with a wrecking ball.
I grew up on Cold Spring Lane and York Road, which is about, I guess, a little less than a mile from here. I sat right there in the last section, in section 11, which was the 45-yard line. I was here to the very end during the good years with John Unitas. A lot of sentimentality here, a lot of memories.
How hard is it to separate your own memories from the task at hand here?
Well, when you're doing the job, you just try not to think about it. It just has to be a building that you're taking down. We have a contract. We have families to feed. It's our job. Every day that we're here, people stop and take pictures. Some people get teary-eyed. A lot of people ask questions. A lot of sentimentality here. A lot of memories.
Does anybody say to you, don't you feel like a bad guy doing this?
Not really. Not really. I guess they might think it, but they haven't said it. And I'm glad they don't. But the reality is, the old girl's tired. You know, we hit it with a ball and it's just falling apart. The concrete's very thin, it's brittle. A lot of the reinforcing steel has become exposed to the weather over the years because of deteriorating concrete. It's showing a lot of deterioration. It's time.
The preservationists, led by former Governor Schaefer, made a good point. They said the stadium was built as a memorial to the Maryland war veterans, and it was wrong to tear the whole thing down. The mayor of Baltimore agreed, and he promised a compromise. He said the familiar facade with the memorial inscription would be left standing, but the rest of the stadium would be leveled. It took almost 4 months, but the grand old lady of 33rd Street finally did come down. Joe Ehrman and his sons were among the last to visit and say goodbye.
But this is where Unitas and Moore were. Well, that's cool, huh?
Yeah.
That's really cool. Looks like a war took place, doesn't it?
It was a mess.
It is a mess. I think there's a thing called a theology of place. Being a minister, there's sacred ground, and it comes from an old Hebrew prophet, Jacob, that had a dream where these angels ascended and descended, and wherever God works out his business and people work out their business with God, is sacred place. And as a minister, one of the things I do is funerals, and I can't tell you the number of funerals where I've done where that either the Colt fight song has been played by a bagpipe, a lone bagpipe, or they played the tape of the Colt fighting song. But when you tell the story of Baltimore, woven all through the fabric of this century will be the story of Memorial Stadium and the Baltimore Colts.
The weatherman has certainly cooperated in Baltimore. We've got a jam-packed stadium, 57,557. And this game has been sold out since the day the Baltimore Colts won the Western Division title.
The terrible towel is poised to strike. There will be thousands of them waving in the stands today, and things are looking good.
Bradshaw pumping, firing downfield. There goes Stallworth. He pulls it in at the 30, the 20, the 10, the 5, and it's a touchdown for Pittsburgh on the ball to Stallworth.
ESPN Classic thanks you for watching this presentation of the National Football League.